everybody. So I want to give it some clarity. So if you'll permit me, I want to take you through what actually she has. If you could put up on the screen here there we go. Okay, now what we got here is a picture of a skull with the top removed, like we've taken the top off of my head here, right? And inside, we've actually taken the brains out as well. What you see here is this big fiber structure that divides the two hemispheres of the brain, and all that's left behind is these veins that sit against the skull. There's two kinds of vessels in our body. There's arteries that take blood to the tissue, and vein that brings blood back. And in the brain, the venous system, the vein system, is rather complicated. It sits here, and it's part of the skull, really. This is called the transverse sinus. And Hillary Clinton had a clot right there, right in this vein here. It's something very unusual. It typically happens in children and teenagers, and it's not something typically associated with head injury. She apparently hit her head, had a concussion, meaning something rattled her brain, quite literally. But in doing so, it triggered this clot up here I'm showing you on the skull. And people that get this kind of a clot from head injury typically have some sort of pre-existing, this is going to get kind of complicated, so hang with me, coagulation disorder. Your blood has a system that helps it clot. That's how it clots. There's a whole series of proteins, and your platelets get together, and there can be disorders in that. There can be things you are born with, like a protein S or protein C disorder, or there can be things you acquire later. In fact, cancer is associated with this. Now, we all know that Ms. Clinton had a clot in her leg, which is when people talk about blood clots, that's usually what they're referring to. A venous thrombosis deep in the leg that can migrate to the lung, cause something called a pulmonary embolus. The fact that she had a previous clot and this would make me very concerned about cancer, were it not for the fact that that clot in her leg was actually in 1998. So it's been almost a decade and a half since that last clot, and now this one, which makes everyone, and you hear them talk about this in the news a little bit, think about a congenital disorder, something maybe she was born with that predisposes her to clot. No, that can all be taken care of. What they've done is they have put her on anticoagulants, a blood thinner, a very powerful blood thinner that will dissolve this clot. The complication that occurs should this clot extend is the pressure in the head can begin to build up. There can actually be things like strokes or brain damage that occurs. I want to make this distinction from, show me my other picture up here. This is very different. What Hillary Clinton has is very different from what we often think of as a blood clot on the brain from a head injury, which is called a subdural hematoma, which is a blood clot that develops and pushes down on the brain and can harm the brain tissue below it. That's what typically people have from head injury. That is not what she had.